Here is the week 17 tutorial recording, and by so far I hope you already be familiar with what we have done for the mathematical solving part of the question. And I do believe in this, since it's not since mathematical questions are not quite um, even not taking parts in the first midterm at all. In the second midterm, you are to expect some more mathematical question. And also due to the fact that we have dealing with the same type of question with a little bit of alternation every time, a little bit here and there. So in the next midterm, you do have to expect that you have this kind of mathematical question. It might turns out to be somewhat more verbal than you expected, but then most of the question could be explained mathematically. And yes, then that's something I want to mention. So let's go back to this new question here. So for this question, for question 1 in this tutorial, I will try to mention the important parts of the process, and I will leave the rest to you to figure out how it is. Also, I'll just simply put down the solution, and I expect you to fill in the blank if you're actually watching this video. So, of course, use the pause button when you need it. So for part A, it asks you to write down the employees' expected net benefits using the information given in the question. So one important part is since it's employee, so it's basically the agent's net benefits. And when we mention net benefits, it's always the wage subtracted by its cost. And since the agent is risk averse, so we will have this kind of risk premium attached to it. And the question asks you for expected value of net benefits. So what we are looking for is expected NB. And if you solve it all the way to the end, the expected NB should turn out to be alpha plus beta 1 E1 plus beta 2 E2 subtracted by a half, and that just simply copy down the cost function, E1 square plus E2 square subtracted by the risk aversion. And if you simplify the entire risk aversion, it will just become this form. Okay, some of the parts I need to mention here so we can be slightly more clear. Risk premium is always equal to the risk aversion rho divided by a half, and variance of wage. And in this question, since the random variable epsilon 1 and epsilon 2 are correlated, that's why we will have this term. But that term should originally turns out to be 2 multiplied by beta 1, beta 2, and multiplied by the covariance between epsilon 1 and epsilon 2. But since since sigma epsilon 1, epsilon 2, which is the covariant of them, is a half, that cancels out with the 2 over here. That is why at the end we'll just have beta 1 and beta 2. So something else to mention, variance of A plus B is equal to variance of A plus variance of B plus 2 times covariance of AB. Okay. So that concludes the first question. Let's go on to the second part. So the second part asks you to use incentive competitive constraint to explain how much E1 and E2 depend on the optimal contract wage equal to a alpha plus beta 1 at y1 and beta 2 y2. And the reason behind is also simple. Remember how you get to the compatibility constraint is you're using first order condition with respect to different type of effort. So what you have to do, so through FOC, with respect to E1 and E2, you will be able to have beta 1 star equal to E1 and beta 2 star equal to E2. And what's the important part of this? As I mentioned in those previous easier cases in the previous few tutorial, when you are doing FOC, it's equivalent to simply doing something like setting the marginal cost equal to the marginal benefits. And that is what we have here. The marginal cost, which is your effort, should always be equal to the marginal benefit, which is beta 1, the return to the effort. So this important parts of this part is to mention MC, marginal cost, is equal to the marginal benefits. But in the exam, we expect you to put these kind of things in words, so please do not just put something like MC equal to MB. It's a little bit hard for the reader to interpret what is going on, because short form MC, MB, they could apply to a lot of different things, and writing the whole word out isn't that hard for you. So in the exam, just simply mention marginal cost is equal to marginal benefits, and that concludes this question. I also mention a little bit about how these things happen, because we take first order condition and with respect to the efforts, and we figure out that marginal cost is equal to marginal benefits in this case. So that concludes part B. And part C. Part C asks you to write down the employer's expected paid off. So now we are going to the employer's part. And whenever we are doing employer's parts, once again, we start with the expected payoff or expected net benefits for the principal or the employer in this case, expected benefits of it. And that usually give us x minus wage subtracted by risk premium. But in this case, our employer, which is the principal, is risk neutral. And when it is risk neutral, the risk premium can basically goes to 0. That meant what we left with is x minus by the wage. And other things to mention, let me see, other things to mention. Other things to mention for this question. Simplify that to E plus Q minus wage, which is X is the payoff and wage is just, we can copy it down from the previous part or from part 1. And by solving everything, you should be able to find out that the optimal level of beta 1 and beta 2, that's the beta 1 star and beta 2 star, is equal to 2/5. And to mention what's happening in between, of course, just let me bring this down a little bit so we do not miss all the important steps. So to mention what's happening in between, first of all, we set expected net benefits as equation of betas. So we can simply bring in everything and make expected net benefits for the principal, or sometimes we call it expected profit of the principal. Let's change it to profit so we do not mess it up with the net benefits for the agent. So we set this expected profit as the equation of betas, and after setting that to beta, to FOC with respect to beta 1 and beta 2 separately each, that is d pi over beta 1 and d pi over d beta 2, or delta beta 2. And also important to mention, whenever you are setting this expected pi as equation of betas with a lot of betas, make sure all the e's are substituted by betas. Basically, since why is this the case? Because employer as himself, he has no longer worry about what effort is, because from his point of view, he cannot decide, he cannot choose, he cannot affect what the agent is choosing. So in this case, you would like to substitute every efforts in your equation into betas. And this is also because the principal at this point, he knows how would the agent choose his efforts. The agent will only choose his efforts as how much beta is given. That is, the agent will choose his effort as marginal cost of the agent, which is the effort, should be equal to the marginal benefits of each type of effort is given. That is beta 1 and beta 2. So that is why the principal would like to use what he knew about the agent and substitute those information into his expected profit to make the most optimal betas work here. And if you want to put this in words, if you're as a boss in the company and you have to understand how to motivate your employees, for example, how much salary to give, how much luxury, like sorry, not luxury, services, like how much to decorate the coffee rooms, the break room, and how much valid toilet time is given to the employees. It's like how much free time they have, how much is so-called necessary free time so they can use it during the break, or some free time that they will not necessarily interrupt their work is given to them. And given all this information, you will know you will know where to invest and how much to pay to your employees. So this is basically what is telling what has been told from the function. And that concludes question part C. And let's go to part D at this point. Part D asks you, given the optimal contract and given everything, now what is the employee's optimal expected contribution to the firms? Well, so that part is perhaps the most easy part that's being asked here. The optimal contribution, since optimal contribution X is equal to E plus Q, and E and Q are each function of effort 1 and effort 2, then this just simply translated in, if we take expected value of the entire thing, then the optimal level of contribution would be given as 2/5 plus 2/5, which is equal to 4/5. And that is the optimal level of contribution that is being provided by the agent. And additional to that, Something else to mention, since we have experienced a lot of different stuff, now the closing question here might not need to be might not need to be the might not need to be the expected contribution. You could also ask you what is the expected profit for the um principal, and what could be the expected payoff from the employees. So other question to think about, expected payoff to the principal, that is expected pi equal to something. And you can also ask the expected net benefits for the agent. And there's a lot of different combination of question can be asked, or the professor could simply ask you everything all together. But then these things are not hard to find out, so you should be able to figure it out yourself. And just go back a little bit, I just realized that part C asks you for the employee's expected profit, and unfortunately somehow I skipped the step and just simply jumped to part D. So something to mention here, something to add on to here, the expected profit. The expected profit function, eventually what you will find out is beta 1 plus beta 2 subtracted by beta 1 square subtracted by beta 2 square subtracted by half beta 1 beta 2. And that is what you should find out. And whatever mentioned in the next part here is finding the optimal level of beta that is given, and that is actually your part D. Okay, just let me put the part D back in here. So what I want to say here is that for the last few tutorial that we all experienced together, you should have realized that everything looks somewhat similar to each other. And from this step, from what we have learned and from the previous experience, the steps are quite equivalent. So first of all, you find out who is the agent. So from the agent's part, figure out his net benefits and use FOC to find out how the method he will try to put his effort in, like how he will use his effort in the case to maximize his profit. And in the next part, figure out the principal's expected profit and substitute in how the agent will put in his efforts. And with this piece of information, the principal can now do the same thing, FOC, first order condition, to figure out what is the most beneficial beta to provide, so he can maximize the agent's efforts. And just at the end, you will need to be careful about what exactly is the question is asking. So in this case, it's asking for the optimal contribution. But as I mentioned, he can ask you something else. What is the expected payoff to the principal, and what is the expected net benefits for the agent, or how should the salary be paid, or simply write down the optimal contract. Figure out its alpha, figure out its beta, and then write it out explicitly. And we will so much be appreciated if you could simply circle out your solution. Not to circle out stuff that is not important for the question, but to circle out the most important parts. In that kind of sense, it saves us a lot of time for marking a paper, and it simply delights the marker, and he might be easier on you on all the mistakes making in between the steps. So that's what I want to say. And now let's go to question 2. Okay, hello. So welcome back, and now we are trying to deal with question 2. So question 2 asks you for CEO's pay performance sensitivity, and he wants to ask you, do you think the payment is relatively strong or weak, and why do you think so? So for this kind of question, it will always be much more clear if you are able to, after analyzing the entire case, um, after giving out your objective, sorry, after giving out your subjective um, analysis, give it a little bit of something else, like um, how you will think about how this will actually apply to the real life. So if giving examples, for example, like an actual case, how much it actually works in the active firms. So in this case, just let me walk you through. So now it says the CEO sensitivity payment is defined as dollar change in the for each $1,000 change in the wealth of the firm's shareholder, and that basically means when the firm's value changes, the CEO earns some payment. And it also says that the payment performance for CEO in United States is vary widely, and the value is between $3 to 15. And if the CEO's performance sensitivity is $10, and now ask you, how do you think about this? Is this strong or weak? And give a reason. So if we simply look in the range scheme that is provided, from $5 to 15, that meant it's relatively on the stronger end of the spectrum. And if you look at the overall payment, so that is like each $1,000 change in the firm's value, that will give us $10 pay to the CEO. And how much percent is that? That's exactly 1% of the net change. So for each change, for each value change of the firm, the CEO will receive 1% payment. And if you think about this, 1% payment, could this is relatively a small value in comparison to how much those salesmen are making. For example, um, for some performance shops, for some sports shops, if you're working as a salesman there, the commission fee is usually 20%. Or if you're a insurance seller, the commission fee is definitely something higher than 1%, range from 5% to 10% or something even higher, depending on what type of goods you're selling. If it is services, then yes, services, financial products, usually the commission fee is high. But then if it is some physical stuff, it's still higher than 1%. It's usually 5% to 10%, some kind of range between there. But if you're now considering that is only considering as percentage change for the CEO, how percentage change, percentage received for the CEO as a commission. But if you're considering how much value is he actually bringing to the firms, that is a different story. So now we need to consider 1%. Just let me put it down. 1% seems to be small compared to salesman's commission fee. But the amount of selling, the amount of change to the firm is different, or the type of change to the firm is different. Like the services CEO is actually providing. Let's say the type of change to the firm is different. Well, so if we consider in the case, back to the salesman versus CEO. So what salesman is doing? Salesman is just selling the goods. So if we consider how the material that actually made a pair of sports shoes, that could be relatively cheap if you consider what exactly the material is and how much those material worth. It's definitely not worth how much they are selling. Like usually we are buying some kind of sports shoes, $15, $100 plus, and if I think talking about those kind of limit type edition, those are even crazier. But then the material actually making them might just worth 15 less than $15 if they're actually making Philippine or some kind of like a developing country that is that is massive in manufacturing. The cost is that the cost to this kind of the material cost, the physical cost to this kind of firm is relatively small. But then for hiring a salesman to sell your products and to motivate them, that cost could be relatively larger. And then there are some other courses that could be divided into different departments, like the designing department and the marketing department, and also that also this kind of profit should also be shared to all the shareholders and of course whoever is directing the entire firm, that is your CEO. So the CEO receiving parts of the could receive parts of this kind of payment, but then it's not as important as how much effort he's putting into a smaller into one of each particular product. The CEO is controlling the entire firm, so each product, if consider how much effort he's putting in for each product, could be relatively small. So that is why the CEO is not receiving anything from the actual product itself, but then he's receiving payment as the change of the firm. Well, so the type of services to the firm is different service, and that is why the CEO is receiving only 1% payment of the change of the firm, but then he's receiving also he's receiving 1% change of value for the entire firm. So um while the salesman's while the salesman or each department only receive commission fee or receive additional payment, performance payment to only what they are responsible for. So for example, team A decided products A. So they are only receiving commission fee for products A. How much products A earns will goes to partial of how much product A earns will goes to the team. But then CEO receive parts of payment from the entire firms. So regardless of which team provides the products, as long as it's under the CEO's command, under the CEO's direction, then the CEO receive that kind of profits for every single product. And those products which brings value change to the firm. Well, so to talk in more details, you can consider if a firm worth around, let's say, $10 billion, that is something a relatively developed firm will worth if they are actually on the stock market. $10 billion yeah, maybe not a lot of firm worth that much, but then if you are able to hire a CEO and pay him something, that is usually how much a firm will looks like. Well, some other firm could be larger than this size, but then if your firm worth $10 billion, that's quite a lot. And now considering in the last year, in last year, sorry, in last year. So now consider in last year, CEO has bring 10% increase to the firm. Brings 10% change to the firm. So how much change is that? That is exactly $1 billion. Well, that is 1 billion. Then there's $1 billion change to the firm's value, and so as the shareholder. So shareholder basically receive this $1 billion change, or whatever share they are holding now was aggregately $1 billion more than it previously was. So $1 billion change, that would imply CEO is receiving the CEO is receiving a 10 million worth payment in for whatever he have done last year. So if you're considering the amount of money that is earning here, that is quite a lot. And usually when we're talking about this kind of commission fee, that is additional on what the CEO is receiving annually. So what I meant is CEO does have a regular salary, and at the annual or at the monthly performance evaluation, he will receive additional more than what he was regularly being paid. So in this case, the CEO will be relatively happy to receive that much dollar for how much change he bring to the firm, and that is why we want to argue this $10 payment is actually not that big as we expect. So the $10 so if we considered the scale of the firm, a 1% payment could be large. Well, similar scenario, just a equivalent cases to mention here. Some other firms, while this firm could give a pay performance sensitive scheme, but some other firm might pay in a different way. So in some other firms, they might prefer to pay 20% of the CEO's wage as shares of the firms. So eventually the CEO will become a shareholder of the firm if he work long enough for the firm. For example, 10-year, 5-year, 10-year, basically becoming a tenor. Then the firm is starting to paying him instead of fully in cash. The firm will starting to pay this person in shares. And what is the point of that? The point of it is, of course, improve the incentive for the CEO. So considering the case when you actually have a share in the pie, will you like the pie to be larger than it was than before, or would you just keep the pie the same? So now if I'm saying to the cake maker, how large the cake you make, I'm gonna give you 10% of it. Will the cake maker be happier to make the cake larger, or keep the cake as the same as before. Then if I'm the cake maker, I would definitely make it larger. And that is why a CEO would perform harder for the firm to increase the firm's value instead of work as how good he was in the past. So there's some kind so the key point of this question is that 10% is 1% is not small if you consider the scale of the firm. And why is it giving 1%? Because the firm wants to motivate the CEO to work for the most to work for the best of the firm. So in other, if you want to explain it in other kind of sense, you can also mention something like, uh, you, uh, you or the principal will like the CEO, or in this case, you can also say the agent, to share the same goal as you. So as long as the CEO have the same goal as the principal, the agent have the same goal as the principal, he will work his best towards what actually benefits the principal the most. And if you consider the extreme cases when the principal and the agent share 100% of goal, that is, you are self-employed, working on your own business, and that would be the most beneficial case of it. But then if your firm goes too large, and or you just don't want to manage it anymore, you want to hire somebody to work for you, that is your CEO or that is your agent, you need somehow to share the same goal as him. And that could be financially, or that could also be some mental or psychological goal that you both share together. Like, for example, being the best firm in the world, something like that. I don't know. Be creative. But anyway, that's all I can give for this tutorial, and I hope you enjoy it. Have a good day.